The lullaby sirens sounded just after dusk, soft spirals of music that curled through the towers like invisible smoke. Shades lowered over every window, street lamps dimmed to candle glow, and the city exhaled as one. In every neighborhood, people filed into dormitories where the regulation nurses checked pulses, inserted intravenous nutrient lines, and murmured rehearsed reassurances. 3 quick years, they promised the drowsy masses. When you wake, the world will be green again. Someone joked that the nurses never changed their script. No one laughed hard enough to stay alert. Within an hour, an entire metropolis had traded consciousness for a curated dream fabricated by the Ministry of Respite. I lay on a cot in the back row, eyes wide, heart hammering. The sedative pumped into my forearm, cold as river water. Any minute, according to every physician I'd ever met, my cortex should have folded itself into the metabolic hush that carried most citizens through the 3-year hibernation. But I'm a chronic dreamer. My REM cycles misfire, snagging wakefulness like a loose thread, refusing to let go. The first time my body resisted the mandatory sleep, I was 12. I screamed because I thought the chemical hadn't worked, but Mother slapped a hand over my mouth. "Pretend," she hissed, "or the vigilance will take you." Now, at 27, I no longer had to pretend. The vigilance already knew. They watched from glassed-in balconies above the dormitory, tall silhouettes in black coats, eyelids unblinking. The insomniac minority 5% of humankind never entered respite, and therefore ran civilization during the long slumber. Officially, they were caretakers. Unofficially, they rewrote every ledger, rule, and archive while we dreamed our synthetic gardens. For a decade, I'd collected rumors. Extra food stores diverted to private feasts. Dissenters vanished. Memory edits stitched into the wake-up orientation films. But rumor was smoke. I needed fire. I slid the needle from my arm, letting the chem blood drip into a hidden flask so sensors would still register dosage. When the lights dimmed to blackout, I slithered off the cot and crawled beneath rows of sleeping bodies. Soft breathing filled the air like tide against a shore. Before the automatic sentry drones made their sweep, I squeezed through a maintenance hatch into a vertical conduit. Metal rungs climbed toward the roof, heartbeats echoing in my ears. For 3 years, this cavernous city would belong to the Sleepless, the Vigilance, and, if I succeeded, me. At street level, the boulevard looked like a stage after curtains fall. Vehicles parked in neat lines, storefront signs blinking in standby, fountains frozen mid-jet by conservation protocols. Overhead, the moon dangled, bruised and enormous. I padded toward the old tram depot, pushing my way through a service door left ajar. Inside, monitors glowed with maps of energy flow. 4 vigilants in silver armbands debated resource allocation. I recognized Director Hess, a man whose broadcast speeches dripped paternal warmth. Now his tone was ice. "Extend respite to a 4th year," Hess said. "The glaciers are retreating slower than forecast. We can't afford 2 full wake years with demand spiking." Another vigilant objected. "The charter promises 3 to 2 cycles. We break that and half the sleepers will riot." "They won't remember what they signed," Hess replied. "We adjust the orientation reels, trim a year from their internal clocks. They'll thank us for the extra rest." My stomach clenched. I'd suspected memory edits, but this was explicit. I pressed the record bead behind my ear, capturing their voices. Evidence, at last. But evidence requires witnesses, and the only citizens conscious enough to judge the vigilance were the vigilants themselves. I needed another audience. I lithely withdrew, nearly colliding with a janitor pushing a supply cart. He startled, dropping a mop. Under the cap, his eyes were the color of storm clouds. Solara, wary. Insomniac, clearly, yet his armband was copper, the lowest caste of vigilant. Menial labor. "Easy," he whispered. "You're not one of them." "Neither are you?" "Jonah," he said. "Maintenance 6? Aira?" I replied, though the name might brand me. 5 years ago, I'd been interrogated for refusing the neural mask that feeds dreams. My file was still flagged. Jonas surveyed the corridor. "They'll trace your biometrics if you stay on the grid. Come." He led me through tunnels where sensor arrays had gone blind from convenient malfunctions. "Some of us don't swallow the directorate's sermons," he murmured. "We keep the ducks filthy, the cameras blurry. Call it passive rebellion." "Why not active?" He gave a sad smile. "Too few, too scattered. We'd need a symbol." I tapped the recorder tucked in my collar. "How about evidence?" We ducked into a substation stacked with backup servers. Jonah powered up an auxiliary console. I transferred the recording. Hess's words crackled in the hush. Jonah whistled. "That's the match, but lighting it, how?" "There is one channel," I thought, "that even the directorate can't fully police. Dreams themselves, while sleepers float in respite, they share a neural network called the Common Meadow, a collective hallucination designed to soothe anxiety. Chronic dreamers like me never lose full agency inside it. I can lucid step, plant messages. If I could smuggle the recording into the meadow, push it into millions of subconscious minds, they would awaken already suspicious, maybe furious. The vigilance couldn't erase every spark once people were alert and talking." Jonah studied my face as if reading the plan. "You'll need the dream loom." "That's housed in the Apex Tower," I said. "Fortified. Everything's fortified." He rubbed his temples. "But airflow ducts run beside the data spines. I can map a path." I felt hope expand, sharp enough to hurt. "Why help me?" "My sister sleeps on level 7, he answered. "When she wakes, she deserves the truth." We spent 2 nights, measured by moonrises because clocks were now irrelevant, preparing. Jonah forged an engineering passcard bearing the alias L9. I memorized blueprints, practiced crawling through ducts no wider than coffins, swallowed nutrient tablets since cafeterias were sealed. We moved like ghosts while the vigilance updated climate models, discussed prolonging taxation on the comatose, and toasted their vigilance in crystal lounges. From catwalk shadows I watched them dance, their laughter brittle, hollow. On the 3rd night, snow sifted across skylights, muting sirens and alarms. Good. Weather interfered with thermal sensors. I entered a ventilation shaft behind the central library. Metal squealed, dust choked my lungs. At junctions I consulted Jonah's scribbled arrows. Up, over, down again. The hum of servers grew louder until it vibrated through my teeth. Finally I reached a grill of hexagonal mesh. Beyond it loomed the dream loom, a circular chamber whose walls shimmered with fiber optic vines. In the center, a column of pale gel housed billions of sleeping brain patterns, swirling like phosphorescent fish. A single operator sat at the console, vigilant gold band, ranked just below director. I dislodged a screw noiselessly, eased the mesh aside, and dropped onto a suspended parapet. Below, the operator adjusted sliders that modulated the meadow's weather sunlight percentages, breeze intensity, taste of ripened fruit. The audacity of a few minds tampering with the interior heavens of millions made my hands shake. I leapt downward, tackled him before he could shout. He struggled, and I hated the fleeting thought that he was only doing a job, not masterminding cruelty. I injected a sedative, ironic maybe, and lowered him gently to the floor. Then I slid into the chair. Interface lenses descended, suctioned around my temples. Menus blossomed, encryptions wove like spiders. I located the audio tract that fed ambient bird song into the meadow and grafted Hess's recording to it, amplifying frequencies tuned to the limbic system where emotion outruns reason. But sound alone might dissolve like morning mist. I layered imagery, the director's own face speaking betrayal beside a clock that melted, reformed at 4 years instead of 3. Rage. I needed rage, but also clarity. I inserted a final image, people standing, united, under a burst of dawn. "Upload initiated," said the prompt. 80 seconds. Sweat pooled in my palms. Security would patrol soon. As the progress bar inched forward, the console lights flickered. A figure strode into the chamber. Director Hess himself. He saw the unconscious operator, then me. His composure fractured for half a second, reforming into a cruel smirk. "So the dreamer chose war," he said. "Predictable." He reached for the override switch. I slammed my fist onto the manual lock, snapping a metal rod through the cradle. The toggle jammed. "Your broadcast won't matter," Hess snarled. When they wake, we'll blame eco-terrorists. People forget nightmares first, not this one. I replied, 30 seconds. Hess drew a slender pistol stunner model, non-lethal but enough to fry neural implant. He fired, I rolled. The beam scorched cables releasing sparks. Alarms shrieked. I crawled beneath the console, yanked a grounding wire, and touched it to the metal grate. Electrical flare blinded us both. Hess stumbled, gun falling. I kicked it away, lunged, and pinned him with the ferocity of every suppressed year. Why cling to power while others sleep? I shouted above the sirens. His eyes were flat coin. Because someone must, or because you can. Upload complete, pulsed green across the visor. The chamber plunged into reserve lighting as reactors rerouted bandwidth. The meadow drank my message like dye in water. I released Hess, staggered toward an exit hatch. He didn't follow. Maybe he understood the battle had migrated beyond his reach, into 10 million dreaming minds. Jonah met me in a drainage culvert, face streaked with grease. "It's out?" he asked. "Yes." "Then hold tight." He tossed me a heat suit. "The Directorate has fallback plans. We have to survive until wake." We retreated to the city's lower aquifers, where unused subway tunnels curved like fossilized snakes. Over the following weeks, tremors rattled the steel world above us. I hacked maintenance feeds. Vigilant broadcasts insisted all systems normal. Yet I saw deployment of pacification drones, stockpiling of stun gas, furious strategy meetings. Meanwhile, cortical monitors attached to sleepers spiked. Rapid heartbeats, accelerated eye movement. They were dreaming intensely, wrestling with the truth I'd sown. On day 41 of the supposed 3-year respite, something unprecedented occurred. Dormitory doors auto-unlocked. Bedsheet sensors registered mass stirring. People began to wake. It started as a wave. Level 1 opening eyes, then level 2, on up through the endless tiers. Like synchronized swimmers, they sat upright, removed IV lines, slid feet to the floor. Surveillance cameras captured it. The Directorate scrambled. Orders screeched through headsets: contain, soothe, medicate. But the sleepers moved with slow, deliberate purpose, dream images still pulsing behind their irises. They bypassed the nurses, who themselves blinked in confusion. Many nurses were hibernators too, summoned by rotating schedule, but now prematurely roused. The vigilance numerical advantage evaporated. From the shadow network Jonah had woven, we activated holoprojectors in central atriums, replaying Hess's recording. Citizens watched, jaws clenching. By mid-afternoon, crowds flooded plazas outside Administration Hall, chanting, "Wrong year, wrong year." The slogan spread like static. Vigilance deployed stun drones. Angry citizens hurled nutrient canisters that tangled propeller blades. I saw Hess on a balcony, voice booming through amplifier. "For your own safety, return to dormitories." The crowd answered with raw laughter. The myth of caretaker benevolence had fractured, and nothing mends that kind of break. Confrontation peaked near sunset, when a column of copper-band workers, including Jonah, marched to the gates carrying chain cutters. Gold-band superiors barred the way. For a breathless minute, no one moved. Then a teenage girl, still wearing her hibernation gown, stepped forward and asked quietly, "Why did you lie to us?" No reply. She repeated the question, louder. Others joined until the query became a roar. A gold-band officer lowered his baton, trembling. The gate opened. Inside, databases were seized, evidence archived, tribunals scheduled. Not all vigilance relinquished authority. Skirmishes flickered for weeks in outlying districts, but Hess and his inner circle were detained, awaiting trial, judged by both sleepers and insomniacs, a first in history. When the city finally stabilized, representatives gathered in the amphitheater formerly reserved for Directorate decrees. I stood at the peripheral railing, unsure of my place. Jonah nudged me forward. Murmurs rippled as people recognized the dream courier. I addressed them, voice shaking. "I'm not here to rule," I said. "None of us should rule uncontested. We share a planet too fragile for permanent hierarchies. We need a covenant that no one remains steward without oversight, awake or asleep." Proposals followed, rotating councils with equal seats for vigilance and hibernators, transparent resource ledgers, updated in real time. Voluntary respite participation with alternative conservation duties. The chronic dreamers, those like me caught between worlds, would serve as cross-cycle sentinels, bridging memories so no era could be quietly erased. Months passed. The first democratic wake period began, brimming with messy arguments and startling cooperations. Farmers partnered with atmospheric scientists. Artists painted murals on the once sterile dorm walls. Children dizzy from unexpected freedom chased robotic pigeons across plazas. Not paradise, but possibility. One evening, Jonah found me inside the dormant dream loom, which had been repurposed into a historical archive. Rows of visitors studied holographic reenactments. Hess's confession, the mass awakening, my infiltrations. The imagery made me uneasy. Stories petrify into legend too quickly. "Everything all right?" Jonah asked. "Feels strange," I admitted. "Being awake while the world is finally waking too. I've always been the anomaly," he chuckled. "Every change begins as an anomaly." We climbed to the observation deck. Night lights glittered, powered by grids that now published consumption totals anyone could audit. No sirens heralded enforced slumber. People wandered, sang, argued, kissed. Freedom created its own lullaby. "So," Jonah said, "will you join the next respite? You've earned a real rest." I considered the vast silence of true hibernation, something I'd never experienced, to relinquish consciousness, trusting others to guard the dark, an act of faith more radical than rebellion. "Maybe just a nap," I said, leaning against the railing. "Let's see how the dream unfolds." He laughed, and for the first time the sound didn't echo off abandoned corridors. It rose into open air, alive in a city that finally belonged to everyone awake enough to claim it, and to everyone brave enough to dream beyond the years of engineered sleep.